Hello, my name is Kahindi James. I'm a film producer, scriptwriter, CEO and marketing executive at Uriel Productions. And today, I'm going to give you some tips on making an award-winning story. In our previous session, we had discussed how to make a good script and went into details on the 7 parts that make up a script. Catch that video on Uriel Films in case you have missed it. On today's episode, we are going to talk about the few nitty-gritties that go into making a good story once you have your story in your mind. You may be asking yourself, how do you come up with a story? A story can take any form, any shape, any idea. However, how do you bring or how do you cook up an idea that is worth telling and worth being on screen? Well, the saying goes that all stories have already been told. There is no new story under the sun. So we are just going to be retelling the same story over and over again in a different way. So what are the tips that you need to look at for you to create your story? 1, just look at your environment. Look around you. What are the day-to-day activities that happen, and you can imagine if they will happen differently, how then can that story take a life of its own? That is one of the things that you can look at when you're building up a story. The other thing that you can look at when you're building up a story is the type of message you want to send across. If you're passionate about doing something, if you're passionate about a certain topic within the environment or within the society, then you can find a way of creating drama, action into that idea and make it a good story. But as you're thinking about your story, ask yourself, what is the unique aspect of your story? Now, there's a saying, or there's someone I had saying that you need to make a story so unique that if someone was to steal it, they had no option than to come and shoot it in Kenya. Well, that is the unique aspect that I'm talking about. You need to find, is your uniqueness your location? Is your story set up in a place that can only be Kenya, that it cannot be made in any other country? That could be your unique selling point of your script. The unique selling point of the script can even be the time period that your movie is set. Is it set in the pre-colonial periods? Is it set in a futuristic future that is yet to come and just a fiction of your imagination? Whichever thing that you need to pick, just ensure that your story always needs to have a unique hook. Otherwise, it will look just like any other story that has been told and might not necessarily have the desired impact that you need it to have. Now, the definition of a story is simply a chronology of events that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. For the purposes of creativity, sometimes a writer might not necessarily follow this procedure of starting from the beginning, middle, and end, and might infuse them in a different way. But essentially, that is what a story is. A chronology of events that has a beginning, a middle, and a conclusive end. So then, you'll ask yourself, how are you going to bring out a good story into paper and into a script for actualization as a film? And there are some few tips that I would want to share with you. 1, ensure that you have a good plot point. So, what is a good plot point? Or what is a plot point to begin with? A plot point is defined as a point in your story that significantly impacts the story and takes it into a different direction that is not expected within your storytelling point. Case in point is, as we have discussed in our 7-part structure, the inciting incident is a very key plot point because this is the point at which we push our character to take actions. And plot points can be several within your story. But if you want to place your plot points in a nice way, you also need to know about the 7-part structure because those form the 7 major plot points within your story. Remember, you can have a story point within your story that does not necessarily move the story forward, but rather gives us glimpses into knowing our character, into knowing our environment, into knowing their motives. But however, when a point changes the story and moves it into a different direction, moves it into a different level, changes the state that the character has been in, then that is what we define as a plot point. So as you start your story, as you're thinking about your story, ask yourself, which will be my major plot points within my story? And if you're stuck with this, just go back to the 7-part structure, and at least you will get the 7 major plot points that your story needs to move forward. Once you have decided the plot points of your story, the next part in a scripting or in developing your story is what we call a scene breakdown. A scene breakdown is done even before you start putting the first draft together on paper. And what a scene breakdown simply is just a breakdown of the scenes as you see them within your story. This needs to be chronological from the beginning of your story to the end of your story, regardless of how you want your story to be. A scene breakdown will simply give you an idea of where your story is going. It will show you the scenes that you're going to write within your story and how to edit them out so that you leave just the meat and the gist of a story that you want to tell. Having a script breakdown really helps you in having a clean first draft to begin with, because once you know where your story goes within your scene breakdown, then it becomes very easy to add or remove scenes, to add or to subtract dialogue or characters who do not make sense that you will have thought will be worth it when you're thinking about your story. So before you even sit down to type the first letter on your script, kindly ensure that you have a scene breakdown in place. And a scene breakdown is simply a breakdown of the scenes, not in dialogue, just writing what the scenes are about in a chronology from the beginning to the end, so that you can see your movie even before the dialogue and see how your characters are going to interact with each other. This will help you have a nice, lean first draft, and it will also spark your creative juices as you're seeking to create your story. Now that you have your plot points and you have put in place your scene breakdown, it's time to sit down and do your first draft of your script and your story. Now, the first draft is simply what it means. It is the first writing of your story. As you write your first draft, you need to be guided by your scene breakdown, so that you ensure that you remain true to the story. And this is the part where now you're going to infuse the dialogues in your scenes as per the scene breakdown. To avoid a lot of work and redoing a lot of things, you need to just follow what you had in your scene breakdown, because essentially that is the skeleton and the blueprint for your film. A first draft is rough, as the name suggests, because this is where you just let all the ideas, all the emotions just pour out on the paper, pour out on the laptop to try and bring a script to life. So do not be ashamed about the first draft. It can be as long as 100 pages, or it can be as short as 40 pages for a feature film. Do not worry, this is just part of the creative process. You will have a chance to sit down, add more relevant scenes, add more relevant dialogue if your script is short, or cut off and shave off the fat and leave yourself with lean meat in case your script is long. However, as you're writing your first draft, there are some general ground rules that you might need to know. One, it is that a scene is counted as a page, and a page is counted as a minute. So essentially, if you are looking to make a 70-minute movie, for example, you roughly need 65 to 70 pages of your story for you to be comfortable to reach those numbers. However, this is not written in stone. Sometimes some scenes are shorter because they have a lot of description, but when it comes to the execution on the field, they tend to take a lot of time on screen. So that is why there's a give or take, but generally the rule of thumb is 1 page, 1 scene, 1 minute. Now, in conclusion, we have talked about 3 main tips when it comes to developing an award-winning story. One of the things is the storylining aspect, where you need to ask yourself, how is your story coming into being? Is it influenced by the environment? Is it influenced by a message that is passionate to you? Or is it influenced by the need to entertain people? Whichever idea that you have, just root it into reality. 2, ensure that while you're storylining, you find the unique aspect of your story. And by the unique aspect, we mentioned that it can be the location that your story is set in, it can be the time period that your story is set in. but whichever unique idea or whichever unique angle that you need to come up with, your story has to have a unique angle for it to stand out from the rest of the scripts that are being produced and made. Then we talked about plot points, and we said that a plot point is a significant event that happens within your story that changes the course of the story and impacts character development. We said that as you are looking to develop your plot points, you can be guided by the 7 major parts of a script that we covered in our previous video on our channel. Next, we talked about the scene breakdown, and we said that the scene breakdown is simply the breakdown of your scenes without dialogue chronologically from the beginning to the end as your story is going to look even before you start writing down your script. The scene breakdown is going to help you to streamline your story and to have your idea moving in the nice pace towards a definite conclusion as guided by the 7 parts of the script. Then we finalized our discussion by looking at the first draft and say that the first draft is the first scripting affairs that you're going to go through, and you do not need to worry much about how the first draft is going to look. Just pour out your ideas, because you're going to amend it and going to edit it when you're doing your second draft, your third and your fourth, until you have a final script as you had envisioned it, of course again guided by the scene breakdown that you had created. As you are looking to develop your story, you can look at Celtx as a scripting software option. However, there are many other scripting software out there, but I find Celtx to be easy, to be nicely formatted, and I guess it's a bias because I've used it for many years since I started my journey in the film industry. So if you feel that there is a better scripting software down there, why don't you educate us and leave a comment right here on our YouTube channel. That's it for today. Until next time, keep making movies. Subscribe and like our channel, Uriel Films on YouTube, and follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and get more quality entertainment and education on how to make award-winning films in Kenya.